questions that we are anticipating and hoping will begin to get answered. If you're just joining us right here on Dr. Phil's Merit TV, we are joined by Sherry Walker and Lieutenant Colonel Ken Christensen. We are awaiting a press conference from air traffic officials there in Toronto. On your screen, you can see on that box, the podium. That is where that update is going to take place. We had word earlier that it would happen at the top of the hour. We are now just about 15 minutes after the hour, and it looks as though there are a few people starting to mingle in and get in. We just lost the feed there, but we are continuing to monitor that. As soon as we see them getting ready to start, we will continue and with this breaking news right here developing as we speak. But we are also getting brand new video from this crash coming into our newsroom this morning. We have several different angles of the crash that gives you really a view. This is the angle you see here. This is the video that we had earlier this morning. The plane hits hard, bursts into flames, the wing comes off, and then it flips upside down. And as you're watching that, you're thinking about the people inside that aircraft at that moment, how terrified they had to have been. And like Ken pointed out, thankfully they had their seatbelts on. That is why it's so very important you always wear your seatbelt in an aircraft. This is the newest angle, the newest video we got from TMZ earlier this morning. You can see that was taken from behind the runway, and you can see just how thick that smoke was when that plane burst into flames. So we are waiting for officials to tell us, possibly give us some clues into what may have gone wrong. There's been a lot of talk, Joe, about the wind. There's been a lot of talk about pilot error, but we are waiting to get some late breaking news this morning.
Yeah, Captain Sherry, let's go back to you. This might seem like a simple question, but when that plane hits and goes on its right, the wing snaps. We see a fireball, but then we see it sort of muffled. Did the weather have anything to do with that? The cold weather, the snow?
I don't believe so. The fuel tanks are in the wings. When the wings sheared, the fuel departed the aircraft to the aft. So that kept the fire behind the fuselage, in my opinion. Ken probably has a better thought on that.
Ken?
Yeah, no, I agree. This is a perfect scenario. It's amazing to me how the fuselage kept intact. It's typically with a rear-mounted, engines in the rear mounts like MD-80s or in this configuration. You'll see with a hard landing like that, you'll see the aft tail snap off. And I believe this aircraft had trailing link gear. Is that correct, Sherry?
I'm sorry, say that again. Trailing link gear. I think you're correct.
Gear with this aircraft?
I have not flown the CRJ-900.
Okay. I believe that really helps arrest the landing, and the wing shearing off and get the fuel behind it, and the fuselage not cracking, enabled everybody to get out, and that was very, very lucky, this crash.
I'm telling you what, the more we hear from, and thank you both for your expertise, because the more we hear about the fuel tank, the placement of that, the fact that the fuselage did not break apart. I mean, we knew it was a miracle that everyone survived, but it looks like several miracles had to happen in succession to have the outcome that we have that we're talking about this morning.
Yeah, and the pilot kept flying the airplane. It never didn't stop. So unfortunately, the descent rate, they couldn't fix that at the last moment. And Sherry has probably better look at that than I do.
Yeah, and Sherry, we discussed this earlier. You know, people turn on their TVs and they see the accident in Washington, D.C. They see the fireball coming from the plane in Houston a couple of weeks ago. They see the plane that crashed in Pittsburgh that killed people. They see this when they turn it on, or they pick up this and see it, because that's what we do in news as journalists. We report on it, and they're thinking, I don't know if I want to continue to do this anymore. This is scary, what I'm seeing, because the last month, it hasn't been good for the airline industry. What would you say to those people?
Well, I think if you look at year-over-year statistics, incidents, accidents happen. We've had 20 years without a major airline crash. That last would have been Southwest in Midway when they departed the runway on an icy surface. A very short and challenging runway. But each one of these situations have to be looked at individually. I mean, the engine fire in Houston on takeoff, that was a textbook act by that crew. They aborted that takeoff. Crossfire Rescue was there. They didn't need to evacuate. It was safer for people to stay on board. You have some people coming, so I'll stop. Thank you.
All right. It looks as though we are keeping an eye on the podium there. I want to, when that plane crashed, it looks like people are coming in. We might be moments away. We'll keep a close eye on it. And as soon as they start talking, we'll go to it live. I was actually flying yesterday when I opened my laptop in midair and saw the news of that plane crash. And I can tell you, it shook me a little bit, but I immediately had to remind myself, like you said, Sherry, overall aviation safety in our country is safe. It's when we see things like that, it does shake you emotionally. It does shake your confidence just a little bit. And at that point, it just comes down to having faith in our pilots. Talk to us a little bit, Ken or Sherry. I'm going to start with you, Ken, on this one, in fact. Weather. When it is snowy, when it is cold, and we know planes have to be de-iced, how important of a component is weather when it comes to situations like this?
Well, de-icing is only prior to takeoff,
Right.
Because the plane is capable of de-icing itself in flight. So de-icing is not a real factor when the airplane's landing. Gusty winds would have been more of a factor, or blowing snow. But the weather was fairly clear, some snow on the runway. So the wind gust was more, and the winds were more of a factor in this than the snow or the coldness.
Yeah, Sherry?
Oh, no, I was just going to add, a friend told me yesterday, I think it's like 43,000 flights a day in the US. Consider your drive to the airport. That is statistically the most dangerous part of your flight. Look at all the accidents on the highways. We see these big events, and yes, I understand people get concerned, but you have to understand aviation is the safest it's ever been.
Yeah.
Just first blush, when you saw this land the way it did, the descending, to us, lay people, we think, oh, it looks like a normal descent. But we've had several experts on this morning talking about they may have been coming in too fast. Does the icy and the snowy weather have anything to do with that? Or do you go back and say, yeah, it could have been the descent?
I don't believe that there was any icing on the aircraft. If there were, they would have had de-ice on. And so, whether they hit a last second shear, had a little bit of spatial disorientation from a gust or something. But I don't think it was anything to do with icing on the airplane.
Ken, can you talk a little bit about the training? It's remarkable, thank goodness for cell phones in some cases, especially a case like this, because we were able to really get an inside look at what passengers were thinking, what was being said, what was happening as they were trying to get off that aircraft. It is remarkable, the calm that the crew displayed. And I know airline crews are very well trained in terms of emergencies and disasters, but just to hear them in action, that's something you don't get to see every day. Talk about the importance of the training and how that crew knows to jump into action, because they don't have a moment to panic in a situation like that.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's all about muscle memory and repeatability. So they train and train and train and train 4 times like this. And the passengers were very compliant, but think of how disoriented that is when you're now getting out of your seat upside down and you're walking on the ceiling, which was where the floor used to be. So, but they got out, and positive commands from the crew and the passengers being compliant with that, they got out in a timely manner, and it's really important. And let me add what Sherry was talking about earlier. We have about between 44,000 and 46,000 automobile fatalities per year in the U.S. That would be like a 737. That's 122 people a day that are dying in automobile fatalities. Mm-hmm. That'd be like a 737 crashing 1 per day. So that's a little. That's a good statistic to think about when you're thinking about airline safety.
Yeah, puts it in perspective.
Yeah, a great stat there. And Sherry, let's say the information is released and the investigation is over, and maybe the descent, those pilots, they came in too fast. What should happen? What do you think will happen?
To the pilots?
Is there more training? Are they suspended?
Well, they're suspended now until the investigation is complete. Traditionally, it'll depend if it was determined to be intentional, which I can't imagine it would be. If it was a violation of a federal aviation regulation intentionally, they would lose their licenses. Most likely, however, they'll receive retraining and eventually be back on the line. That is the system. They have, I believe it was Endeavor. They are part of the Airline Pilots Association. They'll have union representation. There'll be a long process for them, but I believe they'll get back in the saddle someday.
Ken, do you think this will get political? Because it already has, and we're seeing both sides come out. I know that the Trump administration, the day after the accident in Washington, D.C., President Trump actually got up and spoke about DEI and the FAA and things like that. What would you say to especially the United CEO that came out last year saying that he wants more female pilots? He wants more female pilots of color. Should we ever broach that situation, that topic? Shouldn't we have the absolute best and brightest that come through these schools? Obviously, both of you have said that there aren't enough coming through these schools, but shouldn't it be about the best and brightest? All right, let's hold tight. We're getting word that officials are approaching the podium now with word on this investigation and the developments. Captain Sherry Walker and Lieutenant Colonel Ken Christensen, hang tight for just a moment.
Okay, is Khalil coming? Khalil, come on. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. My name is Karen Mazurkiewicz. I'm the Vice President of Stakeholder Relations and Communications for Toronto Pearson. Today, Toronto Pearson CEO and President Deborah Flint will be providing an update on airport operations and the investigation following Monday's incident. We also have several representatives from our first responder agencies, as well as our COO of Toronto Pearson Operations. So behind me are Peel Regional Police Deputy Chief Mark Andrews. Peel available to also answer some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen, and good morning to all. We are providing a third update this morning on yesterday's events as the accident transitions to the investigation phase, and I will share more on that investigation phase and what to expect shortly. First, however, it's really important to recognize how grateful we are that there was no loss of life or life-threatening injuries in yesterday's accident. You know, every time you board a flight, you are greeted by flight attendants and by flight crew often. It's their job to make us comfortable and confident about the flight ahead, and they do an incredible job with that. But we saw the most important role that they play in action yesterday. The crew of Delta Flight 4819 heroically led passengers to safety, evacuating a jet that had overturned on the runway on landing that was amidst smoke and fire. I thank each and every one of these heroes, every flight attendant and crew member on Delta Flight 4819. I also thank every flight attendant and crew member across the industry. Thank you for all that you do every day and every night in service of safe air travel. In regards to the accident yesterday, at approximately 2:15 p.m., Delta Airlines Flight 4819 from Minneapolis to Toronto, operated by subsidiary Endeavor Air, was involved in a single aircraft accident upon landing at Toronto Pearson. The plane was carrying 4 crew and 76 passengers, among them 22 Canadians. Flight attendants, flight crews, and airport emergency workers and responders mounted a textbook response, reaching the site within minutes and quickly evacuating the passengers. At the time, there were 21 injured passengers, ranging from minor to critical but not life-threatening injuries. A total of 19 passengers went to the local hospitals, with 2 more going to hospitals in the time period after. At this time, Delta Airlines has reported that 19 of those passengers have been released and 2 remain hospitalized. Our thoughts go out to all of the passengers impacted and their families. We have taken great time and care to extend care to each of the passengers that were here after the accident. That includes comfort as well as support in their emotional well-being in the hours since the crash. We have completed the reunification process for all of the remaining passengers, and we'll continue to care for them during this extended time. I will now give you more information about the operation and what to expect in the days ahead. From last Thursday to Sunday, Toronto Pearson saw extreme conditions, 2 separate snowstorms. On Thursday and Sunday, we got more than 20 inches, 50 centimeters of accumulated snow. That is actually not typical. In fact, it is more snow within that time window than we received in all of last winter. There were many delays and cancellations across this part of Canada and the U.S. Northeast during this time, creating numerous flight delays and backlogs. At Toronto Pearson, 221 of 974 scheduled flights were canceled on Thursday. 75 of 1,012 scheduled flights were canceled on Friday. 128 of 937 scheduled flights were canceled on Saturday, and 371 of 987 on Sunday. Monday was a clear day, though, and it was an operational recovery day for Toronto Pearson, with 1,006 scheduled flights. The results yesterday, in due part to the accident, were 462 scheduled flights canceled and 544 flights operated. Let's now talk about the investigation and what to expect in the next few days as we pivot to this phase. Last night, 7 members of the Transportation Safety Board of Canada arrived at Toronto Pearson to begin the investigation. 13 more of those investigators arrived today. Members of the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration are also here on site, participating in the investigation. As it is a Mitsubishi aircraft, Mitsubishi will be here on site as well, and Delta Airlines has sent their GO team who are already here on site. So what does this all mean for operations at Toronto Pearson today and in the days ahead? Our Emergency Operations Center does remain open, though operations on the runways resumed at 5 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday. We have been in recovery mode since resuming flights at 5 p.m. yesterday, catching up on delayed flights, and that continues into today as well. We are currently without use of our longest east-west and north-south runways. This and ongoing expected additional weather conditions today will affect how fast we recover operations, particularly with departure of aircraft. We do expect that the investigators on site will be reviewing the aircraft on its current configuration on the runway for the next 48 hours. And we are looking to get to support that investigation and the removal of that aircraft off the runway, at which point we can do later this afternoon. In closing, I thank the industry, the community, and all of our employees here and across the sector for all the work that they are doing to support this incident and those affected, and that they do every day. Air travel remains the safest form of transportation. We are proud of that record here, and at times like these, we're very grateful and thankful of how the community and the industry comes together as one. Thank you.
We'll now take a few questions. Folks who maybe can come up to. Okay.
Hi there, Alex Capriello with News Nation. A question about the conditions yesterday. Obviously, you just explained the extent of the snowstorms that came over the past few days. Wondering if there's been any developments or any comment about what exactly it was like on the runway in terms of iciness or wind gusts. Last night we heard the fire chief say that he did not believe that played a role in this crash at all. Is that still the theory here? And if so, do we have any developments on what caused the crash if it wasn't weather related?
Okay.
Yeah, this would not be a time for us to have theory or to speculate on what caused the crash. So as I shared, we have a number of agencies that are here that are responsible for doing a thorough and full and complete investigation to determine all the causal factors, and we are looking forward to getting those results and to sharing those, and those will be shared very publicly once they are received.
And I understand that if you don't want to speculate about the crash, but can you tell us then what the condition of the runway was like at that time of the impact? I mean, was it slick? Have your teams been able to determine that?
I look forward to sharing all of that information at the proper time. Again, those are all the details that are going to be covered during this investigation, and that is active currently.
Vio Saisai from the New York Times. I have one question and a follow-up. Does air traffic control handle CRJs differently than other aircraft in crosswinds?
The air traffic control is responsible, NAV Canada, for all of the aircraft activity here at Toronto Pearson and in the surrounding areas. They will have to respond differently themselves as to how they manage those aircraft uniquely.
And then how do you decide to pause operations because of wind, and who makes that decision?
That is a cross-collected decision that is made between NAV Canada and the pilots during live operations. We are not pausing operations. We do have a slowdown in the operations due to 2 of our runways being closed for operations at this time, and those are the key contributing factors to the delays.
Last question. There's no Delta or TSB representatives on the stage with you right now. Are you able to speak to why they're not present?
We've been very much in communication with all of those involved, all of the agencies, Delta Airlines and others. We've all had quite extensive communication. They've been in our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center. So the system and the response to the accident is working as planned and going quite well with our partners.
John Worrell with the Associated Press. 2 questions. One is the 2 people who remain in the hospital. Any timeline on how long they may remain?
I do not have that information.
Do you know what condition they're in?
What we do know is that, again, 19 of those that were hospitalized are no longer hospitalized. The 2 that remain, none face life-threatening injuries from what we've been briefed and what Delta Airlines has released as well.
And just finally, Deborah, given what we saw from all the videos that are on social media, and I'm sure what you've seen internally, how is it more remarkable that everyone was able to survive this incident?
There are so many factors that lead us to have gratitude today. Again, I cannot commend enough the crew, the flight attendants, pilots, and our emergency responders for their quick and effective response. It's really incredible. And when you see that aircraft, it just makes you really thankful for all the safety checks that go into running this one of the world's safest air transportation systems.
Okay, we'll take questions now from the first responders, please.
Good morning, Momin Qureshi from 680 News Radio. My question really is, last check, the wreckage was still out there on the runway. I just wanted to know if we know how long that will be out there and what kind of impact that's having on service here at the airport.
Yeah, so as I shared, yes, that the remains of the aircraft will remain on the runway while the investigators are performing their reviews. We expect that could be about 48 hours. And so until that time, 2 of our runways will remain closed, and that is affecting the volume of traffic that we're having. So passengers should be looking and working with their airlines, checking our website for information on delays and potential cancellations as well for the next several days.
Just as a follow-up to that, then, I've been upstairs, as many of us have, talking to passengers, and many of them, most of them, all of them really are understanding of the ripple effect, but are extremely frustrated by the lack of information or conflicting information. So just what do you say to your passengers right now who are trying to get themselves on flights to their destinations, but are left feeling frustrated by conflicting information or a lack of information?
We are here very much at the airport to support and provide passenger care for people that might find themselves here at their airport and have their flights disrupted. So we'll continue to provide that customer care for them. But in the interim, please do check with your airlines, check your website, and check your apps for your most updated flight information.
Thank you. We'll move now to questions to the responders. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, sure. It's Shauna with City News. Can you talk a little bit about the response, how long it took fire trucks to get to the plane? And can you talk a little bit about the flame that we saw in the video and the smoke, and, you know, was it easy to put out? And just really take us through the response.
All right, Todd.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The actual time, it was a very quick response from Toronto Pearson Fire Emergency Services. Upon arrival, the crew did witness spot fires. They were able to quickly knock down the spot.
Can you maybe just describe what it was like to get these people, you know, hanging, cut down, and out of the plane?
I believe that most of the passengers self-evacuated at that time, and upon arrival, they were being escorted to a second location.
Hello, Nate Foy, Fox News. I'm just seeking some clarity from a first responder's perspective on the elements in your efforts yesterday. I know a lot of people are hoping for some clarity on what the fire chief said, and it sounds like you guys won't give us that, but can you tell me what it was like out there on the runway as you were doing your job? Was the runway dry, and the wind gust, how did it impact you?
And like we mentioned, it's very early to make any conclusions. I know I provided a little bit of information yesterday for transparency. Today, now we have an active investigation. Therefore, any of those questions would have to be directed toward Transportation Safety Board.
Hi there, Karen Lieberman with Global News. Besides the chief, I just wondered if any of the other first responders can speak to their own experiences and what you found and how you cared for some of these passengers.
Sure.
Thank you for the question. Mark Andrews, Deputy Chief with Peel Regional Police. I'd like to, before I answer the question, I'd like to say that our thoughts and prayers are with the 76 crew members and 4 passengers and their families that were impacted by yesterday's events, which fortunately had the best possible outcome for all of us. Our response as Peel Regional Police, we're the police of jurisdiction. We have a really robust presence here at the airport. We actually have a fully functioning division with 100 officers and civilians located. We have a presence on the public side and the private side. So we were able to respond in a very timely fashion along with our first responder partners. The conditions were difficult, but I will say this, that we regularly practice with our partners in fire and EMS and the GTAA and Transport Safety Canada. So we were prepared for this event, as extreme as it was. And our men and women, not only in policing, but across all the first responder services, did a tremendous job. And in my mind, no doubt saved lives. So I'd like to acknowledge that. There was some impact, on the police of jurisdiction being ourselves, not only here at the airport, because as you can imagine, we don't have surge capacity to deal with something like this the way they do in the private industry. So we had At one point, we had 50 police officers responding to the circumstances here at the airport and the surrounding environment. What I'd like to do is thank our partners at the OPP, Commissioner Tom Creek and Chief Marion Demke, because they supported us through the aftermath of the incident. Officers to support both of our public. Well, all in all, it was a great response by first responders supporting GTAA and our TSB partners, but it's something that we've practiced and we're well prepared for should this happen again going forward.
Mississauga Fire and Communications Services received the 911 call. It's called a crash alarm, so we get it directly from Pearson into our communications center. So we had a very quick response. We had 6 apparatus from Mississauga Fire respond. It was a combination of aerials, engines, and squads. In addition, we sent our command vehicle and also a tanker. We also had an acting platoon chief, a district chief, and myself that attended the scene. I took a position within their emergency operations center. Just to reiterate what Deputy just said, annually our firefighters at a location called Festi. It's a training facility. Our primary response is to assist with water supply, search and rescue, rehab, and medical support. The Mississauga Fire and Emergency Services and Mississauga Office of Emergency Management participates in 2 annual emergency exercises that are held at Toronto Pearson International Airport each year, including a high-level tabletop command exercise and a full-scale boots-on-the-ground emergency exercise. In addition to the exercises conducted each year at Toronto Pearson International Airport, the City of Mississauga conducts its own functional emergency exercise, and we did that in 2021, examining an aircraft accident occurring within the City of Mississauga. This exercise included partners from various organizations, including those represented in the exercises held here regularly at Pearson. The Mississauga Fire and Emergency Services and OEM provides emergency management training to regional partners from various organizations who may be involved in the response to an aircraft accident, amongst other emergencies. The Mississauga Office of Emergency Management can also serve as a conduit between the city and the Provincial Emergency Operations Center if provincial-wide coordination for the response and recovery of community impacts during an emergency is required. During an aircraft accident, the Mississauga Office of Emergency Management can assist in the coordination of providing municipal services if requested by our community partners who may be impacted in the event. This could include transportation like buses, facilities, or heavy equipment. The City of Mississauga has developed its own aircraft accident emergency plan, which conforms with and operates in conjunction to the airport emergency plan developed by the Greater Toronto Airport Authority.
Thanks. That was a fulsome response.
I just also wondered if anyone can speak to the nature of some of the injuries.
Do you want to speak to some of the nature?
Good afternoon. My name is Corey Tkach. I'm a commander of operations within Peel Regional Paramedic Services. So upon our arrival of the crash site, our staff were faced with a multitude of different injuries, mainly stemming from back sprains, head injuries, anxiety, some headaches, nausea and vomiting due to the fuel exposure. So those were the common sort of injuries that we had come across.
Any more questions?
Please, Mal Hamidi, Canadian Press. Just want to follow up on this rescue effort. Can you please provide some details on the timeline? How long did you, paramedics and firefighters did it take for them to get to the airplane, and how long did it take for them to evacuate the airplane?
Okay, Todd, you want to take that?
Doing their job, helping passengers get off the plane. Can you please comment on their role in this?
Sure, absolutely. We train for such events. We're very well prepared and trained, and the firefighters responded textbook. They were able to knock down the fire. They're able to assist the passengers getting off the plane, and then performing triage and then response to the hospitals.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Alex Miller with Scripps News. I know you can't confirm what you saw on the runway, but can you confirm that the runway had been coded as fives across the board as a wet runway for the pilots, which is a runway with light snow or slush?
Sorry, I don't know if I followed that question. Do you want an answer, or do you want it repeated? Did you get it?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, because there is an active investigation, that will have to be directed towards the Transport Safety Board, please.
Hi, Jessica Murphy, BBC News. I want to go back to something Mr. Andrews said. You talked about difficult conditions that rescuers faced on the ground. I'm hoping you could go into a bit more detail.
Sorry, with who said? Sorry?
BBC. Oh,
no, sorry.
Peel Regional Police.
Peel Regional Police.
Thank you for that question. The conditions that I was speaking of is the environmental conditions, the cold, the wind, the fact that we were still having the occasional snow, but those are conditions again that we're used to working in as first responders, and our people, along with the other first responders, did a tremendous job of responding in those conditions. It's part of the environment that we operate in.
Megan Fitzpatrick from CBC News. What can you tell us about the child that was airlifted to sick kids? Do we know if the child was on somebody's lap or buckled in? What can you tell us about the nature of their injuries?
No, we don't. I'm sorry.
You don't know if the child was on a lap?
No, we don't have those details.
Can you give us an age range of the passengers on the plane?
We don't have that either. I would direct that to Delta.
Okay, we're going to take two more questions.
Okay.
And just one more. Of the two that are in hospital, is one of them the child?
We're not sure either.
I have a quick question for fire. Flammable is it? How much time did that give you to tame it?
Okay. Did you hear the question? Okay. It's on the jet fuel, like whether they were.
Yes. Upon arrival, there was jet fuel and there was flames. We do have specialized aircraft rescue firefighting equipment that carries water, foam, and dry chem, and that it is utilized to smother and cover up the jet fuel to provide mean-free egress for the passengers. So we do have the appropriate equipment and the appropriate training to mitigate that emergency.
Okay, we'll take the last question.
Just like a last question on the nature of the injuries. The people who were more seriously injured, those who were at one point in critical condition, what type of injuries were those? Are we talking about like broken bones, serious sprains?
I think the paramedic did speak to that a bit, but he can come back and reiterate.
Yeah. So on the initial assessment in any mass casualty incident, we do a triage of patients. And yes, some patients were deemed to be critical at that time. And we make that assessment based on our initial contact, what the patient's complaining of, the fact that they were involved in a plane crash. And some of those determinations happen quite quickly in the short amount of time that we spend with that patient to ensure that they're receiving the quickest care possible. And there are times when further care occurs and those conditions get downgraded. So from critical to like serious and non-life threatening. There are times in scenarios like this where somebody may be complaining of like abdominal pain or a head injury, and we may err on the side of caution to deem them critical because we can't see inside their skull, we can't see inside their abdomen, but based on some of their vital signs and other determining factors, that's when sort of the decision to make them a critical patient would have occurred.
So in terms of like the acuity
All right,
of...
we are listening live here to an update from officials in Toronto on that plane crash that happened yesterday. We heard initially from the CEO, Deborah Flint. She's the CEO of the airport there. She started out by thanking the crew for their incredible response. Right now, you're hearing from fire officials. They say their response was very quick. We have learned in terms of new information this morning that all 19 people who were carried to the hospital, of the 19, 2 are still hospitalized and 2 are in critical condition.
We also know that she obviously started the press conference on thanking that there was no loss of life, also thanking the crews that were involved. We know that Delta officials are on ground. We know that FAA officials are on ground. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada, they're there. Mitsubishi, who made the aircraft, they're there as well. So we know everyone's on board there. Talked about the snowstorms. She started that off by talking about the snowstorms that they were alerted of, the 2 separate ones. Let's bring in Captain Sherry Walker and Lieutenant Colonel Ken Christensen, who's been watching this. Your initial thoughts, we'll start with you, Sherry, on the outcome of this and the investigation so far.
Well, it seemed to be pretty textbook. It looked like the first responders did their job. They trained for that at every airport in America. So, you know, folks are very lucky that we do have those resources to us. And one thing I thought was interesting is the airplane will remain on the ramp for, or excuse me, on the runway for 48 hours. I would suggest that probably after that, they will move it into a hangar where they can continue to do their accident investigation. And I think Ken probably would know more about that process.
And Ken, I wanted to ask you, was there anything in particular you were looking to hear? And was there anything that stood out to you in these initial stages of the information they're releasing?
You know, not really. I mean, this is standard aircraft crash investigation. They can't release any medical data other if there were fatalities or injuries because of patient privacy, and they still are putting the scene together. They haven't moved the wreckage yet because they're still doing that preliminary. It's been less than 24 hours. So in probably 2 to 3 days, they'll be able to get more answers. They'll have a preliminary report out, and then probably a 30-day report. I'm not sure what Canada's time frame is on that, as opposed to the NTSB, but it's a very like system because they work very closely with the NTSB and the FAA. Nav Canada does.
Yeah. One of the things that we did learn is there was a question about the fire crews and their response and what they did to try and help people get out of the aircraft. But it was at that moment we learned that most of the people self-evacuated. And that really was a testament, I think, as you were talking about, to the crafting of these aircrafts, the seat belts, the seats, all the things that have gone into making an aircraft as safe as possible. Can you speak a little bit to that, Sherry, that, you know, the significance of the fact that most of the people were able to self-evacuate? Some of the injuries we heard were back sprains, a few minor head injuries, things like that.
Well, I would preach that this is the reason you should listen to the flight attendant safety briefing every flight, and why when they say it's time to evacuate, leave everything behind, why that's important. Big bags plug the holes in the side of the airplane and prevent others from evacuating. So please always heed those safety instructions. And I noticed most of the passengers on this flight did leave everything behind. So a testament to those passengers as well.
Ken, final word on this. What are you looking forward to hearing and seeing the next couple of days? And should this take longer than 30 days?
Well, the civilian accident investigation reports come out usually 1 year after the date of the incident, and that's because there's so many parties included. There's engine manufacturers, aircraft manufacturers, airlines who fly those manufactured airplanes, air traffic control facilities, airports, and then also training facilities. They do a 72-hour look back on the crew. There'll be labs taken and to be evaluated. there's a lot of things that will be done, and the people are still here to talk about the incident, and that's the beauty of it.
That is the miracle coming out of this, and we are also grateful for that. Of the 19 people taken to the hospital, again, we do know 2 people are still in the hospital listed in critical condition, but all lives were saved, and that is a blessing this morning. This has been a Dr. Phil Merritt TV breaking news report, our extended coverage. As we get new information throughout the day, we'll keep you updated.
$36 trillion. That is the U.S. debt, and it